Hi friends, Phil here and welcome to another lesson on the Draw Awesome YouTube channel. So this one is pastel pencils and it's a portrait of a horse that I was asked to do for a friend as a commission. So my friend Lucy, this is her horse called Lily. Lucy and Lily, I always get the two mixed up, but Lucy is the person, Lily is the horse, and she asked me to do a little portrait for her that she could put up on a wall just as a little memento of a competition that she'd won recently. So I thought I'd kill two birds with one stone, and at the time I did the commission but also created it as a lesson on Art Tutor. So it was a premium lesson on Art Tutor. For those of you that aren't aware, Art Tutor is no more, it doesn't exist anymore, so I'm taking all of my premium courses and classes and lessons that were on Art Tutor and I'm going to be adding them to the YouTube channel over the coming weeks and months. So we'll be covering lots of different mediums: pencil drawing, pen drawing, charcoal, pastel pencils, colour pencils, a little bit of line and wash as well, and lots of different subjects, so definitely something for everything. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, maybe consider giving us a subscribe, that way you're not going to miss any of these lessons that are coming up over the coming weeks and months. Now this is an in-depth lesson, so it's designed to take you from blank piece of paper all the way through to finished drawing. We're going to cover lots of different techniques and it's very easy for you to follow along, so you just watch a bit of my instruction, pause the video, catch up, watch a bit more, pause, catch up, and so on. YouTube makes it really easy to do that. I've added chapter markers below the video so you can see the various sections and stages that we go through, and you'll also find a link to download the reference photograph and a copy of my final drawing, a high resolution version of my final drawing that you can refer to. Let me know what you think in the comments beneath the video. I'm always interested to hear your feedback, whether it's good, bad or indifferent, or even if you pull me to bits. I don't care. I'm just interested to hear what you think so that I can continue improving these lessons and adding more of the type of content that you want to see. Okay, so I hope you enjoy this one. Let me hand you over now to my younger self and you can make a start.
Let's take a quick look then at the materials that I'll be using for this particular lesson. As you'll soon see, you certainly don't need to have the same materials, the exact same materials, certainly don't need to have the same brands as I'll be using. And then we're also going to go through that really important process of choosing our colours ahead of time and sticking to that nice limited palette. Now the piece of paper that I'm working on is actually different to what I did the commission on a couple of weeks back. So this is just a bog standard pastel paper from De La Rowney. It was the closest colour, it was a mid-grey, the closest colour that I could find from the commission piece. If I remember rightly, that commission piece was done on a piece of pastel mat by Claire Fontaine. A little bit more expensive than this kind of paper. Probably does allow me to get a slightly smoother blend, maybe a few more layers than a paper like this. But I think we'll still get a really good result with this one as well. So don't obsess over your pastel paper, just get yourself a mid-tone and something with a bit of tooth. Now the actual pencils that I'm going to be using today are a different set, a different brand to the pencils that I used for the commission a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to be using Faber-Castell's Pitt Pastel today. I used Derwent's pastel pencils a couple of weeks ago. And that was just purely because that's what was available to me at home as opposed to what's available here in the studio. But I think this makes a really important point about materials. The difference between a great piece of artwork and a piece of artwork that maybe doesn't work out doesn't come down to materials. It comes down to technique. So those things that we try and teach in the majority of our classes and courses, things like value, things like colour choice, things like observation, as long as you've got materials, a set of pencils in this case, that are of a reasonable quality. So pencils that are designed for artists as opposed to, say, school children for making arts and crafts. As long as you've got those reasonable quality materials, it's not going to matter and it's not going to make the difference between whether your final piece works and whether it doesn't. You know, if you think about it, the colours that I choose today are going to be different from the colours that I chose 2 weeks ago. And if I did this piece again tomorrow with exactly the same brand of pencils, I'd probably choose slightly different colours again. Yes, the overall colour palette is going to be the same. I'm going to stick predominantly to whites and greys and the colours within that palette, but the individual pencils, they're going to change slightly. And you know, when you think about it, there are no true colours in life. All colour is relative. So for example, as soon as I printed this image out onto a piece of paper, the colours changed slightly from what they did on the computer screen. And no doubt that would have been different to the colours I perceived if I was stood there at the actual event, which may have been different to somebody stood next to me who, different set of eyes, is perceiving the colours slightly differently again. And then you've got the environment. So the horse under these lighting conditions is going to be different to if they were in their stable or maybe stood on a different surface, a tarmac surface, where there isn't as much green being reflected into the colours of the horse. All of these things change literally minute by minute, day by day. There are no true colours. They're all relative to the environment and the person perceiving it. So please don't stress over getting exact colour matches in whatever piece of art you're doing, whatever painting and whatever medium. Be mindful of the values, the difference between the lights and the darks. So for example, look at this shadow area here. What's the difference in darkness between that and the inner eye there? This is really, really dark. This is a lot lighter, isn't it? But again, it's darker than this. What's the difference between those? That's what you want to be really observant of, not stressing over an exact colour match. So let's quickly go through this process then of choosing a limited set of colours for this particular piece from this set. It's a process I always go through, whether it's for a commission at home or just a personal piece of artwork or for a lesson on camera. It makes things so much easier, so much more enjoyable, takes a lot of stress out of the art making process. So what I've done is I've just cut a little strip of paper from the top there that was spare, so I can just test the colours out on there. I'm just going to bring a little piece of paper in just to protect the surface as well. And then I've got this set of 36, but as I say, it could be a set of 24. That's going to be more than adequate for the colours that you need. Now I want to try and stick to around about 5 or 6 colours for the bulk of the horse's body, no more than 5 or 6. And then we might need a few spot colours just for the headwear there, for the sash, but they're going to be really easy. They're just a few little hints and accent colours. So the first colour, really, really obvious, put that in the middle, is going to be our white. So we definitely need a white for the bulk of the horse. So that's one. And then I can see little bits of yellow in there, little bits of yellow, maybe bits of green as well, but certainly touches of yellow, probably just the sunlight, quite a sunny day reflecting into it. So I don't want it to be a stark white. I want to add a little bit of colour in there, and I think a yellow is a good colour. But it needs to be quite muted. So there's a couple I could choose from. I've got this one here, which is more of a creamy colour, and then I've got that one there, which is a bit more of an obvious yellow. So that one there I think is more subtle. I think that one is probably going to be more suitable, but honestly I could go with that one as well, because that mixed with the white I think is going to give me something like that. Now, although I don't have any other reference photographs for this particular horse, I have seen her a couple of times in life. And I know that she's got some kind of subtle purpley grey markings around her nose. Just this whole area here is a subtle purpley colour, and maybe around the eye as well. But whether or not that's there, with a white animal in a sunlit day, I find that purples, a subtle purple, always works really well in any shadow tones. And it's a little bit like if you've ever seen a Mediterranean scene, a little Mediterranean town, bright sunlight, there's a lot of purple tones that you'll see within the shadows. Works really, really well with white. Now the only purple that I've got available to me, or what I would call a purple, is this really sort of stark purple colour, which might work okay if we lay some of the white on top of it. But I think it's just a little bit too vibrant. This is more of a muted grey purple. So what I can do is mix one of those, and this is a colour that I really like. It's just a light babyish kind of blue. But if I add the white on top of that, you'll see on its own, it just creates this pale blue colour. So it's not really what I would call purple. So what I can do then is mix that with either that purple that I just picked out or something similar to that. So this is one that's similar to that purple, more of a magenta colour maybe, is what it looks like on its own, a bit more of a red. And now if I put the white across that, you can see that that's just a bit more of a muted pastel-y purple compared to this one or this one. These are a little bit more, these are a bit too pink, this is a bit too blue. So I know this means that I'm going to be using 2 pencils instead of maybe 1, but I think that's just going to give me a little bit more interest, particularly with a horse that has not got a lot of colour within it. So we've got 4 colours there. The other obvious colour that I need is a grey. So I've got a couple of greys within this set. I'm just looking for a sort of a lightish grey colour. Now that looks like it hardly shows up on the brown, but I think when we mix that with the white, we're going to be able to get some nice subtle transitions there. I think that's going to give me quite a few options for tackling some of the more subtle values that we can see within the face. So I'm going to keep hold of that one, there was another grey within there that I could have used quite similar. If you only have a dark grey, let's just pick that one out for example. If I only had this really dark grey here, all it would mean is that I'm just going to be blending that with a little bit more white. Okay, and then I want a black right at the end of the scale, the value scale, because I'm going to need some really dark tones for the inside of the eye, the ear and the nostril there. So we have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so we've got 6 pencils in total. Now the spot colours that you can see, let's just have a look at these really quickly just for this, this headwear here. I don't actually have a vibrant bright red in this set of 36. So the two or three options I've got this colour here, which is more of a terracotta red. And I've got this one here, which is going to be a bit more of a yellowy peachy red, but that to me is more vibrant. So I think that, because we want it to be a spot colour, nice and bright, I'm going to go with that one. Now the other colour within that headwear is a blue. So I want a nice, rich, vibrant blue. I don't have a lot of choice. In fact, I've really only got one, and that's this one. And that will do. So neither of these are exact colour matches, but they're going to be fine. Now there's also some yellow in there. There's also a little bit of yellow within the tack, the horse's tack, you know, within the metallic of that. So I'm going to go back to this yellow here. So that's a nice bright yellow. The other one that I've got I could use possibly is this, a bit more of a canary yellow. But I think that's a little bit more vibrant. So I'm going to choose that one. Now here's a good thing. What I could do is I could now drop this yellow just to keep the palette smaller and then combine this one with the white. So I'm actually going to do that. I'm going to just stick to this yellow and I'm going to use this over here for the subtle yellow tones in the horse's head. And then we can use that one for the headwear as well. And then the last colour is this green for the sash there. So let's just go back into this area here. So there's a green that I could use. There's another one here. That's quite light, but I know I could mix that with some of the black or maybe some of the grey. But I'm going to stick with that one there. I think that combined with this yellow for the writing, I think that will work quite nicely. So that really is all the pencils that I need. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 pencils. There's one other one that I might indulge myself in, and that's a little bit of chestnut brown just for Lily's eye. You can't see it at all on the reference photograph, but I know that it's quite a distinctive feature within the horse, and I think it would be quite nice, particularly for the owner, to see that within their finished drawing. So I'm going to bring in a chestnut brown. This is the closest one that I can see. And there we go. That makes up 10 pencils in total. So other than my sanding block and my craft knife to keep them nice and sharp, they're the materials that we need. 10 pencils, a piece of paper, and possibly an eraser as well, a kneadable eraser as well. Okay, so if you want to get your materials ready, whatever is available to you, they will be fine. Get those ready, maybe go through that process of selecting colours out of your set, and then when you're ready, come back and join me and we'll get started with the drawing. So for this one, I'm going to take you through the techniques that I use to draw this out, that I actually used to draw it out for the original piece. I could, I suppose, have traced a photograph. You know, after all, it was for a commission, so it's of no advantage for me to take my time. I don't need to practice drawing a horse. You know, I feel like I can draw it by eye. So why didn't I trace it? Well, one of the reasons when you trace, particularly with pastel pencil, you can't use carbon paper. You can't lay graphite down on the back of a piece of paper and then transfer it, because pastel doesn't sit on top of graphite. So you end up with these really horrible graphite lines all throughout your drawing. The other reason that I don't want to trace is, to be honest, when you're working with something like pastel pencil, you can't get too detailed anyway in your outline drawing, because a lot of that you're going to lose as you're going through the rendering process. So all I really need are these big basic shapes. I need a position for the eye, I need to get the proportions of the head correct, the proportions of the neck correct, but the details are going to come when I go through that rendering process. Now, pastel pencil does erase if you use it lightly. So I'll just show you, if I just go some white marks across the top, kneadable eraser. I much prefer that over say like a plastic or vinyl eraser, which is probably going to disturb the paper surface and tooth a little bit too much. So you can see that it does erase, so as long as I use this lightly, we're not going to have a problem. So what options have we got available to us? Well, if we go back to the first lesson, I suppose we could put a rectangle in maybe to put to get the proportion, the height and width of the head and neck. but to me it doesn't really fit very well. You know, you'd have to put one on here as well, and I don't want to be drawing a rectangle on my final piece of drawing paper. The other option I could do is make a big oval for the head. So that's one option, and then make another big oval for the neck. And you know, that's one that I use very, very often just to get the shapes in place. But for this one, I think I can do this just by looking at the major angles. So I can look at this angle here and create this angle, this one, and this one. And as long as I see this as a big basic shape and this as a big basic shape, I think we've got a fighting chance just by putting a few of these angles in that we get a good overall proportion. Now, just before I do put any of those angles in, I want to just make a mark of where I want the top of the pose to be and where I want the bottom of the pose to be. So it's going to be somewhere, I want to make sure that it's on camera for you. So it's going to be somewhere around here. Okay, so that's going to be maybe if I get this part of the neck in here. Okay, but that's all I'm going to do, top and bottom of the head. Hopefully that's going to be a little bit bigger than the reference photograph. And then I can do the same thing for the outer edge of the nose. So again, I want to make sure that that shows up on camera, and also it fits nicely on the paper. So I'm just going to put that mark in there. That's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to put a whole box in. I'm not looking at proportion. I just want to make sure that the horse's head fits nicely on the paper that I'm working on. You know, the last thing I want is for the nose, the horse's face to be touching right the edge of the paper, because when it's framed and you've got that overlap, it's not going to look any good at all. It needs some breathing space around. The first major angle I'm going to look at is this one here. It's got a bit of a curve to it, but let's ignore that and just put it in as a straight line. So I'm going to take a bit more care over this and just get a feel with the pencil for that angle, lay it down, put your angle in, and then check. So this is quite a small pencil, it's well worn, but I am still holding it right at the end, and I'm using this whole movement of my forearm from the shoulder. It's coming from the elbow and shoulder. What I'm not doing is trying to grip the pencil really tightly and get this neat line here. So I'm happy with the angle of that. And then the top of the head, just got a bit of a curve to it, so let's just pop that in there. And then I've said that this is going to be the outer edge of the nose here. So looking at this angle here now, just taking it from there, let's double check that. One more check. So you can see, hopefully I'm just taking more care that I want to put much fewer marks down so that I'm not having to erase too much on the drawing paper. Okay, so that's going to come around something like that, gives us a bit of room to play with at the top there. So far I've just got these two angles in and a bit of a curved edge for the top of the horse's head. I suspect that we're going to have to adjust that in a moment. Now the next angle I want to look at, and this really is a key one, is this one here. So there are some contours within this. You probably can't see them because it blends into the background a bit, but there are a couple of contours, a double contour there, but I'm just going to see that for now as one straight line. So one angle, I just want to measure the angle of that. But where I place it now, I'm going to get a feel for the width relative to the length of this shape. So I'm looking at this as a basic shape. Let's assume that it goes up to this part of the head collar. So all of this is a shape. Let's see if we can recreate that. So that angle, let's just double check that. I think I've not got it steep enough there. Not too far off actually. So let's put it in there for now. I got a feeling straight away that that is going to be too narrow. So this is going to be too narrow. Okay, but I'm going to leave it there for now and we can come on to some checks in a moment. Okay, and with that one in place, now let's have a look at this angle here. So again, there's lots of contours within this bottom part of the horse's head, but I want to break that into one simple angle. So I'm looking at that angle there. Let's get a feel for that and place that in. So don't obsess getting it right first time. It's much easier to put something down and then to check. Okay, and I'm happy with that. Now that's given me the overall sort of position of the horse within the paper, and I'm happy with that. And it's given me some big basic proportions as well, not to be underestimated. They're very, very important. But now I want to start looking at more shapes within the horse's head, just to give me correct proportions between where the eyes are, the jaw, the nose, that kind of thing. And there's a shape that really stands out for me. So my love of spheres, that's really jumping out to me, that's a nice, almost like a perfect circle there. So I'm going to look at how that breaks into this angle. What I'm also looking at, if I just draw it in for now and then I can show you what else I'm looking at. So this shape here, if I was to draw one here and then another one the same size, you can see that it fits in nicely between this edge and this edge. So in other words, one sphere, two spheres of equal size, that's how wide the horse's head is. So by drawing in one and then let's just draw another one in to check. I wouldn't normally draw this in, but just so you can see what I'm trying to explain, you can see that two spheres the same size give me the horse's head's width. So I'm happy with that. I'm happy that that is around about the same, relatively the same size as it is on there. So let's get rid of that one. Now the next thing that I can do is to look at this shape here. So I don't know if you can see from the reference photograph, but there's a straight line here before this part of the nose. So that distance there, how does that distance compare to that distance? Well, I would say, we just do a little measure, I would say it's almost exactly the same. Maybe a touch shorter, but I would say pretty much the same. So this distance here, from here to here, I want to recreate from here to here. So it's going to be around about there is where this little break point is, so this part of the head collar. Now this part here, let's put that in as a sphere as well, and let's just see what that as a basic round circle, how does that compare to the size of this? I'd say it's smaller, but not by much, and it is a nice sort of circular shape. Notice also as well this angle here, so the sphere isn't over here, it's creating this angle here. So this angle that's coming down just there, that's where I want to place my sphere in. Okay, so a little bit smaller than that one. We've got one in, two in. Okay, now I've got a little bit of distance between this line that I've put in and here. So something slightly out there. Well, there's this little bit of extra, you know, the other nostril that you can see, which we can put in the contour in a moment. But I'm going to say that this angle then must be a little bit too flat. So you can see there, whatever check I did before, it wasn't good enough because this angle is definitely steeper than what I've got it. So I don't have to change the width of the horse's head. I don't want to because I feel that the width is correct because of these two circles I put in. So we can just adjust that with the correct angle. Now, if this does look like a bit of a slow process, it's much slower for me to stop and start and take you through every step than it is just to do it. This actual drawing would take me no more than maybe 5 or 10 minutes to get to the stage that I'm ready to then go and render. So from here, let's get the position of the eyes. Really, really important to make sure they're not too high up and not too low down. So I'm going to look at the angle between the two eyes there. This eye obviously is just this piece sticking out here. So I'm going to look at that angle there. I'm going to put that angle in. And what I want to do then is look at the angle of the eye line compared to my basic shape. So I've got my basic shape in here. The angle of this eye line is just going to skim past the top of it, maybe a bit of distance between the top of the sphere and that. So double checking that. I think maybe slightly steeper, but I think in terms of whether it's high enough up or, you know, not too low down, not too high up, I think that's about correct. Because relative to this sphere we've put in, it's just about missing the top edge, which is where I think it would do if we placed it in on the photo. And one thing that I haven't mentioned, which I do look for all the time, it's one of your best friends, and that is negative space. So I'm just looking at this area here, and this is a shape. How does it compare to this one here? And I feel that I think this is quite good. So I think this is a nice comparison from this shape to this one. Mine's slightly larger, but proportionally, I think it's the same. It's certainly going to make a difference when we start putting the contours in underneath the chin area there. So let's now get the position of the ears in. If I draw a line up from the same angle up from here, this side of the ear, that's where we get our reference point. So let's draw an angle up. So we get that part of the ear. And if we just take a plumb line down, it breaks into this angle. So let's just do a double check. So ours is not far off. I think this probably needs to be a little bit bigger. This part of the jaw here needs to be a little bit bigger Here we go. So we've got this part of the ear in, so let's just put this in as a very, very basic, it's almost like a leaf shape, and you'll see how it doesn't sit on top of the head, it sits into the side of the head there, so it's coming down into here. And if you're not sure about the height, what can you do? Well, you can look at an angle. So you can look at the angle from here to here, that angle there, and that's okay there. Let's look at the angle between the two ears. So there's a slope to that, one of them being further back, that angle there. And I want to look at the negative space again between the two. So I'm looking at this shape here. I'm not looking so much at the positive shape of the ear. And then there's these part of the mane that's been plaited just through to here. So I'm just going to put that in as a cylinder. It's quite difficult to see on the reference photograph with it being quite blurry. Okay, let's just tidy these up. Tidy things as you go along when you're doing a more serious piece as opposed to a sketch. Now let's just double check the position of this ear. So I'm going to take an angle from this point to this point. And I'm happy with that. I think it matches this angle nicely. I've got the angle of the eyes there, so I know my line is basically running through the center of the eye. So I can create this piece that comes out, which is obviously the bone structure underneath the eye of the horse. And then I'm just going to erase this back now, just so I can put a more confident line in. So again, that tip about breaking things down into straight lines is one that I use all the time when I'm drawing out. I just erase that back. So I'm looking at that as a straight line now. I've got the overall size of it, so there's more of an angle there. And the mouth, to put the mouth line in, just look at that shape there. So that's the negative shape that I'm trying to recreate. Okay, let's just put the this headwear in and the rosette. I can see the position of that quite easily. I can look at negative space here, this kind of shape around here, around the ear. Put the rosette in. I'm looking at the position relative to the ear, so the angle. Look at the angle there that's created. The negative space between it for the distance. It's about the same again, isn't it, as the size of this. And all of these things, they do quickly become almost second nature if you use them each time you do your drawing. It's one of the things that you don't get when you trace. Okay, let's get the eye in. Really, really important to get the position right. So if we draw a plumb line down from the outer edge, and by a plumb line I just mean a straight line vertically all the way down, you can see that where the sphere breaks into this neck shape, so this point here, that's where the outer edge of the eye is. So outer edge is here. I know that I've got this eye line here, so that's going to be our outer edge at the center of the eye there. And I can then look at the inside edge, see that that breaks around about this position. Can you see that there? So it's breaking around about this position, plumb line down. So there's the width of the eye. And then I just want to draw it in as a basic shape. So I'm just looking at the outside. I'm not looking at any of the pupil or anything like that. I'm just trying to create straight lines wherever I can. So angle lines rather than curves. There we go. And we've got the eyelid there. Okay, and that's good enough. So there's no point in me putting it in any more detail than that. I can deal with that when I come to do the rendering process. Now all that remains is to put in the head collar. And it's actually easier. I resisted putting this in earlier on because with when the horse has got tack on like this with this head collar, it is actually easier to draw because you've got more reference points to go from. But not every horse that you draw, certainly not every animal that you draw is going to have this horse tack on, this head collar on. So I'm trying to avoid using that just to show you that you don't need it. If it isn't there, it's not a problem. You don't need it to be able to draw a convincing horse. So you can look at the distance to the eye for this part of the head collar. Basic oval for the nose at this stage, just to get the size of it. So it has got this sort of kidney bean shaped shadow inside, but again, that's something that I put in the rendering stage. For the drawn out stage, I just want the position of the nostril. So I'm looking how much distance is there at the bottom. Okay, there we go. That's the kind of level, the kind of detail that I would take an outline drawing up, even for, you know, something that's going to be quite a detailed piece for a commission. So, white pencil first. I'm going to generally go from light to dark, generally speaking, but the beauty of pastel pencils is that you can lay some of those lights over the darks on top. And what I'm going to look for are any of the bright white areas. So we've got an area here around the jaw there that are on the nose, and I'm going to try and create any shadow shapes negatively just by leaving them out, or by certainly putting only a light dusting of white over and then creating those by putting a stronger edge of white around the outside. So start wherever you like. Keep your marks nice and loose, certainly at this stage. Apart from when you're drawing maybe around these shadow shapes, take a bit more care there, but for the rest of it, nice and loose. And a little bit more pressure where I can see that it's light, and then less pressure where I know that I'm going to be adding other colours in, so I've got to get some purples in there. Even within these shadow tones, I can still add a little bit of white undertone, just to help create some continuity there. And then within this shadow shape, just a light dusting of white over the top. Got this nice light area here on the bottom of the mouth. That's quite dark in there, so I'm going to leave that. And then look at this shape here. So we don't need to get these shapes exact, just a rough representation of the shadows. There we go, and then just a little bit of tone into that shadow shape. Lighter here, I've got this shadow. So look at how all this is in shadow here, all around here. And then I'm just looking at this area, this shape here. So I'm going to have a look at this here. Where is it in relation to the eye? So that's just what I'm looking at really, really quickly. Because again, it doesn't need to be exact and precise, not as precise as, say, the position of the eye. And then on that shape there, let's block that in with a little bit more pressure. Nice light area here, and then up around the top of the eye there. There's a nice light patch there, and then just the light's catching the top around there as well. And then this area here is quite light, isn't it? Some shadow there, so let's just, where that I can see that shadow there, let's just give an indication of that. So what you're doing here is you're starting to get a feel for the different shapes that are within the actual drawing. You're not committing to them yet, committing to the colour or the value or anything like that, but you're just getting a feel for what's there, what you're going to have to come on to later on. And then just reserve that area for the head collar. And this is really, really light, so I can use lots of pressure. You know, I don't need to use less pressure and then come back and do another layer. If I can do it really quickly in one go, I might as well. Got this nice light area here. So we've got let's just get my bearings. So the head collar is coming down here. So this is going to actually be dark. The black will go over that, that's okay. And then we've got this nice light highlight that runs down, and this bit I'm looking at runs into the reins. So I'm trying to hold the pencil reasonably far down, although there's not much of this one left. It just helps to keep things a little bit looser, a bit quicker. So look at the lights in between the plaiting there on the horse's mane. And then I'm just going to very, very quickly just get some tone down. Maybe leave that area because it's quite dark, but the rest I want just to get some tone down quite quickly. Okay, so what that has done is just start to create a little bit of form, a little bit of a sense of where the shadows and the highlights are. So it's just starting to give me a bit of a feel for the way that the light is playing on this particular subject. So now let's put a little bit of colour into the shadow tones. So we've got these areas that we've reserved here, start adding a bit of colour into those. And this is where I want to bring in these purples, this nice sort of purpley grey colour. So I'm going to start with the blue, and I'm only going to use light pressure. And again, the reason I'm using light pressure is because I know that I'm going to be putting other layers on top of this, that they're going to be darker values, and so I don't want to get rid of all of that paper surface beneath, otherwise I'm not going to be able to successfully put as many layers as I want on top of them. You don't need to go overboard, it doesn't have to be in all the shadows, but I think particularly around the horse's head, I think it's going to be nice around there, just for a bit of continuity purposes. That's going to be almost all black, but just put a little bit in, you never know, we might get a hint of it come through, which would be nice. Now I'm going to go to that magenta colour, so this is this sort of reddish purple colour. Now I know from experience, if I just bring the scrap of paper in, I know that this is a really strong colour, quite a staining colour. So I've got to be really conservative with this, otherwise it's just going to overpower that blue. So you might not be able to see too much of that going on, but trust me, it is there. It's definitely sticking to the paper surface. And I know when I blend that and come to sort of refine it with the white on top, that it's going to show up nicely. Okay, now what about maybe some of the yellow tones within the white? I could have actually done these before I did any of the colours into the shadow tones. There's no right and wrong order to do anything in. So let's do that now. And again, I don't want to go too overboard, but I do feel that it is going to warm things up a little bit compared to just having it all stark white. Again, I'm getting a feel for how this goes on top of the white that I've already put down. So I'm just using lighter, more conservative pressure to begin with. And then if I feel that it's not really showing up, it's not really doing anything, I'm going to start using more pressure. And again, I want to just look for some areas that are maybe more yellow. So I'm just seeing a little bit more yellow in this area here, compared to say this area around here, which is a bit more of a stark white. Now that, again, that might be a distortion in the photograph. It might be, it might not necessarily be true to life if you were there on the day and that's what you were looking at. But what it allows me to do is just use it as an opportunity to create a bit of variation. So rather than just saying I'm going to do this yellowy white all the way around, it allows me to say, well, there's a little bit more yellow here, a little bit more white here. It's just an excuse to create that variation, that randomness, which is what you need to create something that's a little bit more believable. I'm going to put some grey tones down just into the shadow areas, which is just going to start blending together the purple and the purple and the blue that I've put down. Put a little bit of grey in this shadow tone. So what I can start doing now is, now that I've got a bit of colour down, is I can start looking for the actual values that I see. So how dark is this particular shadow? If you defocus your eyes, you'll see that a little bit more easily. And the best way to really determine it, so that light needs to come in there a bit more, let's just get that a bit more accurate. The best way to determine the value of this is just to compare the contrast between this and this. So look at the difference between my two there, and then look at the difference there. You'll see it better if you defocus your eyes, and you'll notice there's a much smaller difference between how dark that is and how light that is. Much smaller difference there than what mine is. So it means that I've got to lighten this, probably more so than darken this area. So let's just show you what I mean by that. Really, really light pressure. This goes a little bit murky and amongst here. Now if I defocus my eyes and look at the difference between those two values, that's much closer to what is on there. Its shape probably needs to be a little bit more defined, so I can just tidy up the edge, that shadow shape. It's a nice, strong, crisp shadow, but in terms of the values and the difference, I'm much happier with that. So let's do the same on this one. So we can look at the difference between this area here and this area here. So I've got a little bit of colour into the shadow, just blending that together with the grey, neaten up the edge. Okay, and then in with the white. So let's just get rid of some of the paper surface just around this area. So now look at the difference between that and that. There's too much difference, I think. So just ever so gently, just going over that shadow shape. So this has the effect of obviously lightening the shadow. And then I do want to try and keep that nice crisp edge just because that's a good representation of a strong sunny day, strong light source when you've got these crisp shadows. And then look at the shadow here. So look at this area here and this area here. You see how that is lighter than this. So this is a darker shadow shape in here. And then as it gets around here, it gets lighter. So there's not as much difference for this little strip down the nose. Okay, and then I'm just going to repeat that process around this area. So you can see how there, around where it goes into these grey markings, it's sort of a lost edge. So you haven't got this strong, sharp edge like you have here. It's this more of a lost edge, a little bit of a highlight on there. Got this lighter area just where the mouth is. So I'm not trying to outline it really strongly. I'm just, again, only using that light pressure. And just with the black, I'm just going to neaten up the size of this and the shape of this nostril. So that is going to be this sort of shadow shape. But then we've got this piece of the nostril which comes around here, which is really dark around the outer edge. So really strong pressure, because I know this is a jet black. There'll be no point in me putting any colours down within that because they're not going to show up. Okay, there we go. And then as long as I've got some colour underneath, even if it's the grey, some colour and some pastel down underneath, when I lay this black down, it's not going to come out as a black, it's going to come out as a grey tone. So all I'm doing is just looking for the darkest tones within this little area here, just decreasing the pressure. So look, decreasing the pressure around here. We've got this little area of grey, lighter grey. And then we've got this darker outer edge to the nostril. I'll use a bit more pressure there. And then look at this shape here. This really helps to define the mouth. So nice light pressure at first, just to get a feel for how the black is going on. I don't want it to be too strong a value. It's a mid-grey, isn't it? Look at the difference in darkness of this shape compared to this shape. And then let's get a little bit of, we've got to bring the value up of this little highlight area in here, but we can also add some colour in as well. So just a touch of that blue and purple. And then with the grey maybe, just mute that back. Okay, and a little bit of darker value for the mouth area. So I'm just trying to do the lines that I can see and just see a few little patterns of marks. So I'm just going to do the lines in that direction, but then just notice how it gets darker underneath here where it's curving away from the light, and look at this area under here and get the grey and just mute that back. It's probably going to need the black over the top, I would imagine. So that's quite light, that area there. Then this is a nice strong shadow under here. But this piece is lighter than this piece. So we've got to go really dark here just to separate those two shapes. And I'm just going to define this shape in here. So I'm just looking at that nice dark shape here. So I've got the black. I could probably, because it's not a jet black value, it's not as dark as the nostril or the inside of the ear, for example. So if I lay some grey down first, and then I know I can go over with the black and it's not going to be a jet black. And then this piece of the horse's, bottom of the horse's mouth is just showing through. So just touching the white down first, and then I can go over with the grey, and that will give me this undertone of white, just to show that it is actually part of the horse's head and not maybe some more of the tack that's showing through. And then same approach, I'm going to carry it on up into this area. So looking at this shadow here first, I want to add some white into that because it's too dark, isn't it? The contrast between this and the lights around it is too great. So I'm just defocusing my eyes, lightly running this white over the whole shadow shape. Okay, and then with the grey, I can just neutralise that colour and just start to blend them in together. So really light pressure again, just getting a feel for how, I don't want it to disturb the colours too much or completely obliterate any of the blues and pinks that we've put down already. So just getting a feel for that by using nice light pressure at first. Maybe get a few touches of yellow in there that I can just see creeping through. And then around here, I'm just going to start to define this shape a bit more. So we've got this piece of the head collar that comes down here. And then what I can do with the white now is start to define some of the shadow shapes. So look at the shadow that's underneath the horse's eye there. And then I'm not worrying about all these different bits of detail, not at this stage, so I can see, some different lines and maybe some of the veins in the horse's head. I think they are a nice detail to put in towards the end, but I don't need to worry about those yet. Okay, that's a bit of a closer contrast, isn't it, between this and this? So defocusing your eyes, look at the difference in value. That's a lot closer, I would say. Now in here, we've got some darker patches. So the only colour I can go in with is the black, but again, because there's that colour underneath, and with light pressure, I'll be okay. If you wanted to, if you've got a darker grey and you want to go in with that, by all means do that. It would probably speed up the process a little bit because you could use a bit more pressure. But I'm trying to really stick to this limited set of materials, so I'm going to keep to this black. I think we'll be fine, especially if I can tone it down with any whites over the top. Just getting a feel for the markings. I'm not going to get them exact. And then I can just push that into the paper surface with the white. It's only very light pressure, so when I say push into it, you're not using a lot of pressure to push it in, but it just blends it in. And I find using that is better than using your finger or a blending tool. It's much quicker, and it just adds a little bit of an extra dimension to it as well with another colour. And then just to tone this area together, or bring this area together, I've just got the light grey, so ever so slightly, just around the edges there. It's going to be more so as I get into this bottom shadow area. I can pick that up. Just want to go right across that where that head collar is. The black will have no trouble going over that, so I'm not concerned about that. So now I've got the black light pressure here, so I don't want too much pressure. Don't want this to be too dark a shadow. Again, I'm looking for the contrast between this area here and the shadow area. And then just look how this shadow seems to go round and across there. So what we can do is just take it through. Again, don't worry about taking it through the head collar. You can sort that out later with the black. I'll go over that just fine. Now it's around about this point that I like to put in some really strong darks. I've already done it around the nostril in this area, but I think if we get some of the strong darks in for the ears and for the head collar, maybe some for the eye as well. What that does is it again gives us the extremes of either end of the scale. So your darkest darks, we've got some of our really light areas in, and then that just helps me then to bring everything together in between, because I can compare it to the darkest dark and the lightest light. And you know, it's a quick win, if you like, to block in these large areas that really don't have any colour within them. So we get the ears in. Now that is a big area of black. It is looks a little bit flat for my liking, so I'm going to add a little bit of colour into that afterwards. We just get this in quickly for the moment. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to choose the chestnut brown that I chose for Lily's eye, and just add a touch of colour in, just to break it up ever so slightly. And then round the base, I really want a nice strong purple to come out of this shadow all around this area here. Let's get our light grey and white, and then we can just, while we're in this area, just refine it. So again, looking for the contrast between the lights and the darks. So this is around this area, I think the shadow needs to be a bit lighter. There's too much contrast going on. Too strong a difference between this and this. And then carrying on with those dark values. So I think this is a good one to put in. This is going to help just see how light this is, whether we need to go lighter in this area and this area. So just looking at the overall shape, I do want to add some interest into this. I don't want it to just be all black. And it isn't actually an all black shape. There are some lighter areas. If you observe those carefully, you'll see that there are some lighter areas within that. Some shadows and some highlights and things. So I'm just leaving that middle bit free there, and then I can add a little bit of colour in. Just again, for continuity purposes, just going to add that purple colour. Okay, and then let's bring this one down. So I'm not using the full amount of pressure just yet, because again, I might want to put some colour in there. And then we've got this piece. There's a nice highlight within this, so this isn't particularly dark at all in this area. So don't just use this jet black across there. We've got a strong dark under here. I'm not going to get the same level of detail as different ridges and things within this. I'm not going to get that level of detail with the pastel pencils, not at this size and not at this sort of style. It's a little bit looser, but I can leave a little bit of an area there just to show that there is, you know, it isn't just one solid black shape. And then this nice sharp shadow edge here. Looks like there's a bit of a buckle there, so we can put that in, a bit of colour interest. And then with the grey, I'm just going to fill this area in, get some of those purples in as well. Let's get the yellow of that buckle in, so the nice bright yellow. I'm going to use a lot of pressure. There we go. And then get a little bit of the blue and the purple in just to show some continuity. And then what I can do with the white is any highlights I can put in, or any lighter areas within this. There's a nice strong highlight just on that bit. So I can put those in, but I can also use the white just to, ever so gently going over the top of the black, just helps to push the pastel into the paper surface. Just takes some of the starkness away from it, some of the roughness away from that black. And let's just put this one in as well, while I've got this pencil in the hand. So look at this shape. This is not a black at all, is it? This is, you know, a browny grey almost, purpley grey. Put a bit of that brown in. A little bit of the white over the top, again, just to create that correct amount of contrast between the two shapes. And now I think it's worth pointing out as well, with these straps and the shadows that are created by them, just right underneath the strap, you've got a darker shadow tone. And it's a little detail, but it's quite an important one. So this shadow area shape here, same for this one here and any that are created around here, just where the shadow meets the actual strap that's creating it, just touch in ever so gently with the black or the dark grey if you're going to use that, and then just soften it out. And what that does is it really helps to plant the shadow or attach the shadow to the thing that's creating the shadow. Because that's what you'll typically find with shadows, is that they are darker nearer the object, the nearer they are to the object that's creating them, and then they just ever so subtly soften off towards the outer edge. So all around here, just ever so gently, I'm just touching in with the black, and then I can do the same here. And then just soften it out so it really is light, nice light pressure. And then I'm just going to see if I can get a little bit of this yellow on, just for where this buckle is. If needs be, you might want to pick out a little bit with the kneadable eraser, just so you've got a clean surface. But I think if you use enough pressure and you've got a nice sharp point on your pencil, I think you'll be okay. I'm getting away with it here anyway. And then just within the buckle, you can just fill in any of the areas that you've missed. And then just tidy this up, so I'm just looking with the black, just looking for the shadow areas within that. So we've got a little shadow area underneath here. Take that round, maybe just tidy up this edge as well. A little bit of dark, just to help this shape here stand out. But again, it's fairly loose, fairly impressionistic. There we go, we can sort that strap out later when we come onto this area. Okay, I'm not finished with this area yet, that needs more work. Before I do that though, I want to get this eye in. So we've got these strong darks in, we've started to get some nice detailing as well with the horse's tack. I really want to make sure that I get the eye right. To do that, I need nice sharp pencils. So I'm going to sharpen the black, the grey and the white, also that chestnut brown. So with my reasonably sharp pencils, I just want to establish the actual shape. And the way that I like to do this is just with either a dark grey or a black, using light pressure, because I don't want to create an outline that's going to be visible, I should say, by the end of the drawing. I do want to just create something like a light outline to work with. And this is why that initial drawing stage, if you take lots of time over observing little details like the eye or the fine details like the eye, I think it can be a little bit of a waste of time, because when you get to this stage, there's that much pastel going on around that area that you've got to do it again anyway. So I like to just put that basic shape in, and it's at this stage then I start looking at individual contours. So I've got the shape of the eye here that I can see. I can see that the pupil is around here. So this area here is a dark area, so I'm just going to block that in. And then this area here is more of a shadow, so just a shadow of the inside of the eye. And then the chestnut brown part of the eye, so the bit that you can actually see, I'm going to say is somewhere around here. I can't actually see it on the reference photograph, but I can just make out enough of a pupil just in that centre there to be able to guess the sort of the shape. Okay, and then Lily has got these really distinctive white eyelashes. So I'm going to, so just a blurry block of white on the reference photograph, but I'm just going to see if I can put a few individual marks in just to depict those eyelashes. There we go. And now I can start just refining things a little bit. So I'm just trying to see what I can get from the reference photograph. The most important thing is I get the overall shape, the overall block correct. So I don't want to get too hung up when you've got a reference photograph like this and you can't see any of the detail, you don't want to get too hung up on making that detail up to the point where you lose the overall shape, because that then will affect the likeness. You know, if nothing else, get the overall shape right and forego on the detail. You know, get the overall shadows right. Okay, so I just want to soften that out and just look at where the shadow shape reaches to. So just with the white, I can just help to define, just looking at this shape here and this shape above it, because that's defining the eye as much as the darker pieces. Just with the lighter grey then, let's just soften the outside here. So there is some just ever so subtle shadow just around the whole eye. This bit goes a bit darker here, doesn't it? So really light pressure with a black or a darker grey. Darker grey would give you a bit more control. And then just for a bit of continuity, just going to touch a little bit of blue in there maybe, just a little bit of the pink as well. It's just ever so slight, just touching it in. Okay, I think that'll do for the eye. So now that I've got that feature in, now that I've got these darks in, what it allows me to see is what work I need to do on this. And I don't think it needs a great deal, but I just want to maybe get some of the pastel sat into the surface a little bit more. Maybe just do some work blending in some of these shapes, maybe breaking up some of these shadow shapes a little bit with the white and the light yellow that we've got. So I'm just going to do a little bit of work on that. Maybe bring some of the brown in that I put into the ear. So just into these shadow shapes. These just tend to look a little bit browner, I think, than shadows elsewhere. So this is part of the process that I probably find the most enjoyable this stage. You've got all of your basic shadow tones in and your lights and darks in a particular area. And it's a case of just going backwards and forwards with the pencils that you've already picked out, the pencils that you've got to hand, and just making these little refinements, looking for little marks. And the beauty, one of the other beauties of pastel pencils is, I think it's quite difficult to overwork things that you can do with other mediums, more difficult anyway. So feel free just to, you know, indulge yourself at this stage, go backwards and forwards as much as you like with the different colours, just to gently push the pastel into the surface, get rid of any surface texture, if that's the style that you're going for. I'm going to let some of the surface show through on this drawing. I quite like that effect, but that's a personal preference. What I tend to do, what you might want to do, is allow more of the paper surface to show through away from the focal point, so away from the head, particularly the eye. Maybe make that a bit more refined, get rid of most of the paper surface there, but allow it to show through as you move away from that particular focal point. There was a nice little touch that I found worked quite well on the commission piece, and it was just to put in a couple of veins. So all I did, they're quite indicative, quite characteristic on a horse, particularly on a breed like this. So all I did was just strengthen an area, not too much, with the white where I could see the highlight. And then with the mid-grey, again, just subtly, not too much, just create a shadow just beneath where that highlight is. And then there's one just here as well. And it's only a really subtle detail, but it was just, I felt, just a nice little characteristic. Okay, so I think that's all I need to do on Lily's head. I've spent about 10 minutes there or so, 10 enjoyable minutes, just adding in little bits of, you know, detail here and there, bits of colour, just basically refining what was already there, blending it in by using the other pencils, always using light pressure, so never really going too heavy, you know, just using the pencil's own weight almost to push some of the layers in beneath it into the surface. just to get rid of most of the paper surface. What I'm looking to do is to create a more refined feel around the focal point, so less paper surface showing through, and as I move away from that, I can allow more surface to show through. And that contrast between those refined marks and those more sketchy marks is what really helps to draw the attention towards the focal point, which is obviously where you want it. So I think it's time now just to do this, I don't know what it's called, but this headwear here, some nice bright vibrant colours in. So let's pick out the colours. I only had two that I chose, or three, the red and the blue and the yellow there. So I'm just going to start with the blue just to create the bottom half. So it's not this straight line, it's kind of an undulating line that just helps to create a sense of the shape and the texture of that. And then I'm not going to try and put the pattern in exactly, but I just want to observe roughly how the pattern goes. So what I can see are these blue triangular shapes. I'm certainly not going to count them, but what I am going to do is notice how they get smaller and closer together the further into this sash or this headwear they get into. And that's just the foreshortening and the perspective effect. So closer together as they get further away. And then with the red ones, it looks like it's a sort of opposite pattern at the top there. And then let's put some of the red in for this rosette piece here. I'm actually just going to get a nice strong piece of yellow in there. And then I can build the red around that. So it's hard to distinguish the shape. It's obviously a rosette kind of shape, but this resolution, when you print it out, it's quite abstract, which again is one of the reasons for picking pastel pencils in the first place. I can't get too neat anyway with pastel pencils and too refined. Certainly not the way that I use them, you know, unless you want to be sharpening them literally every 30 seconds. You've got to keep your studies relatively loose. And then this piece does look like we've got you know, a little part of the rosette coming down there. So what I'm going to do with the kneadable eraser, where I've put the black in, and just tease that to a point and lift out some of the pastel. You will have to just keep reworking the eraser just to lift out the darkest pastel. You haven't got to get back to the paper surface, and you won't get back to the paper surface. All you've got to do is just get enough out just to show some of the tooth of the paper again. And then what I would do is, let me put the white down first, just to cover that. And it looks like there's a bit of red in there. Maybe a little bit of blue as well. Maybe go for this lighter blue. That's not going on very well, so darker blue it is. There we go, that's all we need for an impression. And then I'm actually just going to go with the brown just for the shadow. I think the black will probably be a little bit too strong. And there's some shadow tone just around this side of the centerpiece there. The white, just put a little tiny highlight maybe just on the edge. Maybe lighten some of these areas up here. So all I'm trying to do is just avoid it being a big block of one flat tone. Just touching the black over that brown just to strengthen any shadow areas. So just along the bottom there, I can just mute that blue, just along the very bottom, and then just soften that edge. Because it will cast a little tiny shadow just onto Lily's forehead there. And then we've got some yellow in between this red and blue. So I'm just putting this in really, really almost haphazardly. Don't want it to be too neat. And then across the top, what I'm going to do is just look in there how there's a highlight. So just being careful not to smudge. If you want to use a piece of paper to protect it, you can do. Well, I'm just going to try and avoid it. So just a little bit of a highlight along the top. And then this area all looks a bit lighter, so maybe lighten the reds off Lighten the yellows off. And then the reverse of where I've made that lighter, I've just got the brown here, it just looks like it goes darker and duller here. So I can just flatten those colours with that brown. I think the black would be maybe a little bit too strong for that. Let's move on to the neck and the body. This is going to be much quicker. This is away from the focal point, so we're going to get looser, sketchier, more free with the marks. So I've put some base tones down already, as you saw earlier. It's just a case now of building those up. So I'm just going to go in with the white, I'm trying to use the side of the pencil where possible, and get a long enough point. And all I want to do is just build up a little bit more tone, just get a little bit more of the paper surface covered there. Maybe a bit stronger where I can see it's a little bit lighter as well. But I do want to be careful that I've got this shadow shape. If I just draw that in roughly, it comes down from here, and then it's sort of this shape here, only needs to be approximate. So I can use a little bit more pressure here, and then I just want to be careful that I use less pressure around here, because we want to get some nice stronger darks in that area. And then with the grey, so the lighter grey, I'm going to start looking at some of these markings. So I can see how there's a nice sort of clear line of white around the top there. Again, using the side of the pencil, because that's going to just keep things nice and quick, nice and loose. And then back with the white, and then I can start using more pressure now just in between those grey pieces. So I'm just trying to get this dappled effect, this indication of a dappled effect. Just put a few in here. They're going to be lost with the darker tones we put on in a moment. Okay, and then I'm just going to go back to the grey again. So just a couple of layers of this, just using a bit more pressure each time, just trying to make the marks a bit more distinct each time. Let's just tidy up this shadow here. So just looking at the shape of that, and then look at how it fades under the horse's neck there, so it really softens off. Okay, and then using the darker brown now, we can start strengthening some of these shadow areas. So I don't want to go straight in with the black, because I think that will be a little bit too flat. Even with this, all of this pastel that's underneath it, I think it would still be a little bit too flat. I think if there's one colour that I would recommend that you choose that I didn't choose, it would be the darker grey. The black, just turning out on its own, just on this paper surface, just a little bit too strong a value for me. So it just adds to the time that you've got to not mute that back with some white and blend it in with the grey and with the lighter grey. Whereas if you maybe choose that darker grey, just add it in as an extra pencil, it's going to save you a little bit of time. Okay, so let's get the black now. So again, keep to the side of the pencil, not using a lot of pressure here. I want to get a feel for how well it goes on. And it will go on nicely, you know, it will cover most things. Hopefully, we're not going to get that jet black, even if we use a lot of pressure. Around here, as much pressure as you can. And again, the beauty, mentioned it before, the beauty of pastel pencils is that even with this dark layer down, we'll be able to go back over with some whites just to create the dapple effect in this shadow area. So it's a nice advantage that pastel pencils gives you over the likes of, say, coloured pencil, where, you know, it's next to impossible to go over a black or a dark value with the white pencil. You're not going to get anything showing up at all. Got a little bit more brown in there, so I don't want to lose all of the colour in there. But it does need to be a nice dark value. Just a little bit of red, just for a bit of extra interest. Okay, and then we just put this sash in. There's a really nice, strong, dark shadow created by that, which just helps to separate it from show that it's sitting away from the horse's body. I'm just going to put that in. Again, I can get a little bit of colour into that shadow. Bit of the magenta, a bit of the blue. Okay, and then with the white, let's just add a few touches. This is going to help to blend things in, but also at the same time just re-emphasise that dappled nature of the horse's colours. I want to get rid of this light edge, so where I've drawn the outline, just with the kneadable eraser, I'm just going to take that away, and then just with the black, just go over that. Okay, and then just getting the kneadable eraser, and I'm just going to almost create this this rain here. I'll try and lift it out. It is really just smudging it in, but what it will do is just reveal some of the paper surface underneath, and that makes it a little bit easier then when I go in. I'm going to go in with the black initially, but I want to just create a bit of a top highlight. I don't know if you can see that. Just on the top of the rain, there's a nice little highlight, which just helps to separate it from the shadow behind it. So underneath, this bottom edge gets lost into the shadow of the horse's body, which is good. It's a lost edge, so it's nice to have these lost and found edges within any composition. So if that's a lost edge there, the found edge, or the sharp edge, just using the white, is just going to be along this top here. And then there's a nice little shadow there, so let's put that in. Let's just do that in the same way as all the other shadows. So putting the blue down first, keeping a bit of colour in there. Just notice the undulations as well. Just helps to re-emphasise the contours on the horse's body. And then on top of that, just going to add a touch of that magenta and a brown maybe, just to strengthen it. And then finally, I want to go overboard with the black, but just to increase the value. Here we go. I'm going to add a little bit of white in between just to separate the two. Okay, and then we've got this really nice green sash here. Before I put the green in, I'm just going to put some letters in, just a bit of the yellow. I can't read the top one. The bottom one says champion, so it might be worth trying to write that in, but don't worry if it all gets lost amongst things. It's more just the impression, breaking the shape up. We don't want to detract from the focal point of the face. There we go. And then what I'm going to look for is just, if you can see how there's sort of a highlight area there. So just taking the white over some of the letters in that area. And then what we'll do, we'll put the green around it and then lighten the green in that area. And it'll just give this impression of a bit of a contour. So I want to keep this quite loose now. So the sash comes around the horse's body here. I'm going to be going over a lot of this with black because it needs to be a really dark value. But we'll put it in just to see if we can get a little bit of an undertone. So keeping it nice and loose, really, really quick. Just going in between those letters. Okay, and then just going to run a little bit of yellow through that. Again, this is as much to just push the green into the surface as anything else. I don't like to use my finger to blend. I don't like the effect that it gives. I think it lifts too much of the pastel off and you end up doing too many layers backwards and forwards. I'd rather use another layer on top to blend that. Okay, so this here now needs to be really, really dark. So as much pressure as you can get away with. And then just lightening off, but going through all of those letters. Lightening off as you get to that area, and then Maybe a touch of dark in this area. And with the white, let's just get a bit of shine on there. And again, it's just to make that shape just a little bit more interesting, that feature, that sash. It's impressionistic, but we don't want it to be just a solid block of green. So just the last couple of details then. So just these plaits in the horse's mane, all I'm really looking for is maybe a bit of a highlight on the top of each one. Just looking for where that is, just putting that in very, very roughly. And then go with the mid-grey first, so you don't go too strong. I'm just put in the bulk of the shape and the shadow at the bottom. So just looking to where it casts that shadow. And then with the brown seems to work quite well for the shadows, so I could maybe have made more use of that in the earlier stages. And then just for the darkest tones, let's just get a little bit of black in there. So I'm going to call it a day for that one. But hopefully you can see from that this is a case of just building up those layers, starting with the bright white highlights first, or the lightest tones that you can see, mapping out those shadow areas, so looking for where the shadows are cast by, in this case, the horse tack, reserving those at first with the white pencil as you put the lighter areas in, and then adding a little bit of colour and interest into your shadows, putting that colour down first, and then using the greys and the blacks to then bring the values up and get the correct contrast of value between the lights and the darks. And that's really what it's all about. In order to create this believable form, once you've got a good solid line drawing down, to create that sense of solidity, that sense of form, it's all about getting the correct values and that blend and balance between the values throughout the drawing. Colour-wise, I don't think there's going to be a great deal of difference between this one and the original. This might have a different feel to it because of the background colour of the paper, but it goes to show that the difference between art materials, particularly any reasonable quality art materials, really isn't that great, maybe even insignificant, and certainly not something for you to get stressed over. You don't need to worry about whether you've got exactly the right brand to follow along, whether you need to mix and match brands of pencils or paints to get the perfect colour combination and colour match to your reference photograph. I hope that I've been able to stress that enough in this particular lesson. Lucy, the owner of the horse, the owner of Lily, and the owner of this photograph, is very kindly given us permission to use this reference however you like. So please do have a go at this. We really look forward to seeing some of your versions of Lily in the Art Tutor galleries. And I, as ever, look forward to seeing you in the next course or class.
Alright, so I hope you enjoyed that lesson. Please do let me know in the comments below whether you've had a go at this or whether you plan to have a go at this and how you found it. Was it easy? Was it difficult? Anything that you found particularly challenging, it's always great to get your feedback. If you would like to join me on my premium drawing course, you'll find that over at drawawesome.com. It's where we take you through a program of weekly drawing projects, kind of build you from whatever level you're at right now, even if that's a beginner, all the way through. The aim is to get you all the way through to a really accomplished, awesome artist. And we do that through regular weekly drawing projects. So if you're interested in that, head over to www.drawawesome.com and also maybe consider checking out artcooler.com as well. So Artcooler is our free community for leisure and hobby artists of any ability, doesn't matter what standard you're at, even if you're a professional, you're welcome there as well. And it's just a place where you can share your artwork with other people on the same journey as you. You get to see their artwork. It's kind of helps to inspire you, give you some creative ideas. We've got monthly challenges there as well, and lots of free drawing lessons on there as well. There's a nice little app, again, completely free, that you can use on your iPhone, your iPad, or your Android phone or tablet, and it just makes it very, very simple to interact with the community and kind of just surround yourself with like-minded people. So when you get a chance, go and have a look into that. That's artcooler.com. Okay, so thanks again for joining me on this lesson. Hit the subscribe button on the channel if you haven't already, and you're going to get notified as soon as I upload a new art lesson. Hopefully it won't be too long. But until then, until next time, take care and enjoy your art.